Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning into today's Author Talk series brought to you by the Library Speakers Consortium. The Library Speakers Consortium is a partnership of more than 350 library systems across the United States, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia, with the goal of making author talks more accessible to communities of all sizes. I am Brandon Adler, your host and moderator in conversation with each of the acclaimed authors that you will hear from throughout our series. Today, we are so excited to have television host and travel expert Rick Steves here with us as he presents some important European travel tips and tools. Before we jump in, though, let me pause for one moment just to give you all that standard housekeeping information, and then we'll introduce our guest and turn things over to Rick. We have compiled some questions that were pre-submitted with registration, but you can also submit questions during this presentation by clicking the questions button that's just below the live stream video. Rick will present for the first 40 to 45 minutes, and then we will hold a Q&A for the last 15 minutes or so of our hour. Please keep in mind there are quite a few of you tuning in today, so we will take as many questions during that Q&A period as possible. Now, to formally introduce our guest. Rick Steves is a popular public television host, a best-selling guidebook author, and an outspoken activist who encourages Americans to broaden their perspectives through travel. He is the founder and owner of Rick Steves Europe, a travel business with a small group tour program that brings more than 30,000 people to Europe annually. Rick lives and works in his hometown of Edmonds, Washington, where his office window overlooks his old junior high school. Welcome, Rick. Thank you so much for being here. I will turn things over to you now.
Thank you very much, Brandon, for having me, and thank you all for tuning in. I'm just going to assume you've all got trips coming up in the next 10 or 15 years, and you'd like to learn from my experience and my mistakes rather than your own so you can travel smoother. So that's my goal for the next 45 minutes. It's just been, I've had a great year of traveling, and I've got a lot of tips to share, and I'm just going to jump right in. I'll tell you right now, I'm going to offer a 2-hour talk in 45 minutes. So a lot of slides, a lot of topics, and rather than just talk faster, I'll be referencing ways you can augment this information with programs that we have available on our website. And everything I recommend is absolutely free. And it's a chance for you to go and get more information online. But I've been to Europe, I think, 4 or 5 times since we came out of the pandemic. And it's good over there right now. You may wear a mask once in a while, depending on your sensibilities and where COVID is. But you know, the big result of COVID is you can't kiss St. Peter's toe like 2,000 years of pilgrims have done. When you go to St. Peter's, when you go to restaurants, there'll be more hygiene. You might have your extra virgin olive oil in a individually wrapped portion, and you might have a QR code to get to the menu. But the big change because of COVID is booking things in advance. That's the big deal, and you got to get good at going to the famous sites with a reservation booked online, paid online, because they want to organize the crowds. The bad news is that takes a little more organization, and you got to commit yourself to a time. The good news is you don't have to stand in line for 2 hours to get into Anne Frank's house. You've got an appointment, and you won't be mobbed as you go from room to room. Only so many people are let in at a time. So don't fight against that. Embrace the idea of booking things as you go or in advance so you can travel smarter and travel smoother. Any good guidebook will let you know about what is necessary to book in advance and what is not. Also, a big trend these days is they just don't staff up for individual sales. If you insist on talking to a real person to give them your money for a ticket, you're going to not get very good service in a lot of cases. It's generally done online with your credit card, and then you get your QR code, you print it out or you have it on your phone, and you travel that way. So that's the big takeaways I would say from COVID. We took 30,000 people on our tours in 2022. 4% of them got COVID and had to leave the tours, 1 out of 25. This year, we took another 30,000 people on 1,200 Rick Steves bus tours, and 2% of them got COVID and had to leave the tour, 1 out of 50. It's COVID roulette. The most highest incidence of COVID was in Scotland and Ireland. Why? I would imagine it's the pubs. People crowding together in an unventilated space, drinking, having lots of fun, talking close to each other for an extended period of time. You're asking for COVID. Nobody's going to get COVID licking their gelato on a piazza in Rome. It's crowded, congested, unventilated spots for long periods of time. That's just my take on it. but I think the trajectory is great. And for me, the good news is the energy is back in the streets in Europe. That's what I was worried about. What would it be like after COVID? And I'll tell you, if you want to do the paseo in Spain, if you want to do the passeggiata in Italy, if you want to clink glasses at the beer halls in Munich, if you want to get your cheeks kissed in Paris, people told me after COVID, nobody's going to be kissing cheeks anymore. They're kissing cheeks with gusto in Paris. That's the great news, that wonderful energy in the streets. So what I'm going to talk about now for the next 40 minutes or so is this: trip planning, packing, safety, communicating, transportation, eating, sleeping, and avoiding crowds. I'm going to be not just talking like a little creature on fast forward. I'm just going to remind you can get extended talks by me covering all of these topics, 20 minutes on each of these topics, if you just go to ricksteves.com. We have hours and hours of lectures on everything from cruising to tech on the road to women packing smartly. We've got all of that information on our website. Just go to ricksteves.com. And remember, the handbook for all of my teaching is the first book I ever wrote back in 1980, Europe Through the Back Door. And I've updated that every year since, with 100 days a year in Europe of experience, and packed the lessons of those trips into this book. Now it's out in an 800-page current edition, and that's where you'll find the extensive, exhaustive coverage of all of these practical sites. The great news is, if you equip yourself with good information, expect yourself to travel smart, you will. Now, I've been traveling ever since I was a kid. I was just a manic kind of note taker, even years before I ever was going to write a guidebook or give a talk. I found my old journals. This is when I was 18 years old, my 1973 trip. And here's my 70 nights in Europe. Grand total of $114 for the two of us, traveling, me and my buddy, 84 cents a night average cost for the hotels. Well, it's a little more expensive now, but the importance of information is just as great. Just a couple of weeks ago, I sat down with my neighbors who were embarking on one of our tours. They were taking our big 3-week tour, and they had a couple days before and a couple days after on their own. And it was so much fun sitting down and planning this trip with them. Enjoy the planning stage of your trip. It's more important than ever to be well planned, because so many people are going over there. So many people want to go to the same places, and the costs are pretty high if you don't know what you're doing. If you're on the ball, you'll get maximum travel thrills for every mile, minute, and dollar, and your trip will be a lot more fun. What you want to do when you're planning your itinerary is see the famous places, but get off the beaten path and find those little places that are just somehow keeping their heads above the flood of the 21st century, what I call back doors. The name of this place doesn't matter. There are just wonders all across Europe. This is Civita di Bagnoregio, 2 hours north of Rome. But the point is, they're all over the place. I just got back from a great trip through Poland, through Iceland, through Estonia, through Istanbul, finding these kind of wonders. The best of the Riviera, you can find it. You can go to a famous resort if you want, or you can rough it and go to a little town like this that has no modern buildings, and you're just staying in a little guest house, and you're hiking through the vineyards, and you're enjoying fish that was swimming in the sea the day before. It's just a beautiful opportunity to connect with the magic of Europe. That's your responsibility. As I said, so many people are traveling and they all want to go to the same places, so you need to be good at avoiding the crowds. We want to see the famous places. We want to go to Rothenburg, but spend the night. Everybody side trips into the most medieval town in Germany. It's a shopping fantasy for a lot of people, but at night the crowds are back in the big cities, and it's just those lucky travelers that are spending the night out rambling the ramparts after the crowds are gone. Sleep in Venice. Don't side trip into Venice like the cruise ship people or all the people on the big tour buses. Spend the night right in downtown and be out early, be out late, and even Venice right now can be all your own personal wonderland. A great part of traveling is feeling the pulse of Europe today. When you look at this picture in the distance, there's a little arch on the horizon. That's the Arc de Triomphe. That's where all the tourists are. Stay in the metro another 10 minutes. Come out here where there are no tourists. This is the reality of Paris today. This is where the local people, the Parisians, eat and sleep and find entertainment and go to work. This is the real Paris. You want to balance it. You want to see the slice of life reality, and you want to see the cute touristic stuff. Now, when you're going to the touristic stuff, don't just go to the cliches. Castles in Germany, the Rhine River, of course. No, This is the Mosel River, the little sister of the Rhine that comes into the Rhine at the town of Koblenz. Here you'll find a meandering river with the same beautiful vineyards, the same half-timbered villages, the same ruined castles and wonderful hikes and boat rides, but none of the crowds, none of the intensity. And that's just a good example of knowing what's out there and finding it. Again, this is just an appetizer for you, and you've got lots more information if you want to study deeper. I've got a 2-hour lecture on every country in Europe on our website, and that's where I'll talk about those kind of places, and they're all free, of course. As tourists, people want our money. When you walk down the main drag in Amsterdam, the Damrak, right between the Hard Rock Cafe and Hooters is a place that fakes like it's a tourist information office. And this is where all the not very good travelers go to get their advice. And if you look at the list, well, what are the top 5 sites to see in Amsterdam? Madame Tussauds, the Body Works, the Ice Bar, the Torture Dungeon, and the Heineken Beer Experience. And they're all on sale today. Wow, it's a ripoff. Where's Van Gogh? Where's Anne Frank? Where's Rembrandt? Where's the Dutch East India Company? Those are cultural sites that aren't commercial ventures, and they're not advertised as aggressively in the box offices like this. As a consumer, be smart. Understand what you're looking at. I love the challenge as a tour guide and a travel teacher and a travel writer to give people context so that when they step into St. Peter's Basilica, the greatest church in Christendom, they're going to see it through the eyes of a Catholic 500 years ago. Park your 21st century sword at the door. Park your Protestant sword at the door and go in as a temporary 15th century Roman Catholic. Then you'll get a sense of what people did then to glorify God. It's an amazing opportunity to see it on its context, in its time. We got to understand our sightseeing. When you see a windmill, you better know what an Archimedes screw is. I mean, we all know the windmill turns in the wind, but what does that do? Well, gears connected with an Archimedes screw, and that's at my foot there, that big wooden contraption just in front of me. That will then spin, and it'll pump water from lower over the dike to higher. It'll drain the land, and the Dutch are free then to create the fertile farmland that helped them become such an important country in Europe. Know what you're looking at. Here we have the famous aqueduct in southern France. Not really. It's the most scenic bridge in the most important aqueduct in southern France. The most scenic bridge in a 30-mile-long structure, engineered so the water would drop 1 inch every 100 yards for 30 miles. Imagine the jubilation on that day 1,800 years ago when water tumbled into the great Roman city of Nîmes. That brings that site to life. Sadly, the typical American tourist that goes to this aqueduct doesn't quite even understand what it is. There's a man-made river on the top of that flows for 30 miles so people don't have to carry water into the town, so that it will flow into the crown using gravity. And the people of Nîmes, yeah, they lost the war, but now they're on the winning team. They're on Rome team, and they've got stability and they've got running water. The museums can be exhausting, and I know that personally. We have only so much energy, so much attention span. We need to understand what we're looking at so the art can become fun. If the art's not fun, you don't know enough about it. And that's why I spent 2 years with my crew creating the biggest project we've ever done for television. We've just debuted it. It's just airing all over the country right now. We've got the 6-hour sweep through the story of Europe. It's called Rick Steves' Art of Europe. And I use 20 years of our archives, and it takes you from the prehistoric cave paintings right up to the contemporary art of today and all the street art. And I was just so excited to put this 90-page script together, and it's available for free now. It's airing all over the country on PBS. You can watch it on your local station live. You can watch it with your PBS Passport app, or you can go to ricksteves.com and you can watch all 6 hours of the Art of Europe. That is a great way to make the art and history of Europe much more meaningful and fun for your sightseeing. That's why I produced it. I've also got a book that I've written called Europe 101, History and Art for Travelers, designed for smart people who were sleeping in their history and art classes before they knew they were going to Europe. Now they got a trip coming up. They wish they remembered who the Etruscans were. This book does that for you. If you're curious, if you're smart, but you weren't paying attention in the art classes, if you want to get turned on by your art and your history as you travel, this book is designed for you. Our challenge as travelers is to feel the pulse of Europe, to be there, to become temporary Europeans, to be caught up in the energy on the streets. The best way to become a temporary European in Europe is, I think, go on the evening stroll. These days, every culture seems to have it. People are out and about in the cool of the early evening. In Spain, it's called the paseo. In Italy, it's called the passeggiata. It's a lot of fun. As you travel, you want to be a cultural chameleon. You want to change from country to country. I don't really eat a lot of escargot unless I'm in France, and then I crave escargot. And if you have not had escargot in France, you have not had escargot. You need to know what that tastes like in its homeland. I just love a beautiful plate of escargot while I'm in France. I'm not that into chocolate, but as I said, I'm a cultural chameleon and I change from country to country. And when I'm in Belgium, I become an aficionado of chocolate. And I go to the most expensive little chocolateria. I talk to the woman whose family's made this chocolate for generations. I buy a variety, I get an education, and I enjoy the very best. We change from country to country. In Scotland, I drink whiskey. In England, I drink tea. In Greece, I drink ouzo. I don't go home after a long day of work in Seattle and crave a nice cloudy glass of ouzo. But when I'm in Greece, I don't let a day go by without enjoying a sunset with a nice cloudy glass of ouzo. Here I am in my favorite little perch on my favorite little island with a nice hunk of octopus and some munchies, a beautiful sunset, and a nice cloudy glass of Greek ouzo. Drink the local drinks, eat the local food, do what the locals do. In your travels, you'll see some amazing nature, and it's accessible. You can get behind the waterfalls. You can hike up to the ridges and do some pretty outstanding stuff, or you can kind of be lazy and ride the lift. Doesn't matter. She looks pretty rugged here, but she rode the lift up. She spent $20 to get to the top of the ridge. She ate breakfast in a revolving restaurant on the top of that mountain, and now she's posing as if she hiked up there. You can enjoy the magnificence of Europe's nature so readily. You can hike or frolic all the way across the Alps from France to Slovenia, never come out of the mountains, enjoying trails like these and sleeping in huts like that if you want to. I've really been into that lately. A couple years ago, the last 2 years, my vacations have been extended hikes in the Alps. Back when I was a kid, I hiked on this ridge. And ever since then, in my lectures, I've always remembered that magical moment. I say, imagine you're walking on a ridge, tight roping on a ridge, high above the valley floor. On one side, you got lakes stretching all the way to Germany. On the other side, you got the most incredible alpine panorama anywhere, the Eiger, Monk, and Jungfrau cut-glass peaks. And ahead of you, you hear the long legato tones of an Alp horn, announcing that the helicopter-stocked mountain hut is open. It's just around the corner, and the coffee schnapps is on. Whoa, that's enough to just get anybody close to heaven. Well, I did that 40 years ago. And just 1 year ago, I decided I want to go back to that ridge. And I went back to that same ridge. And it's the same thrill. It's the same thrill. There's so much great stuff you can enjoy in Europe if you reach out. By the way, every Monday night since the beginning of COVID, we've had a party, a free web party. It's a webinar. It's called Monday Night Travel. You just go to my homepage, ricksteves.com, and click on that. And then you can sign up. And every Monday night, it's a free show. And it's really quite an archive of important hours. The show's an hour long. We eat and drink the local specialties, and we share what we've learned in our travels. And for example, whenever I do something interesting or different, I dedicate a show on Monday Night Travel to that. So I did the 1 week hike around Mount Blanc. We got a whole hour dedicated to that. I did a luxury barge cruise, gourmet barge cruise in Burgundy. We got a 1 hour show dedicated to that. I just got back from the Scandinavian capitals and Iceland. We got a 1 hour show for that. I just got back from Istanbul. We've got a 1 hour show for that. So it's all in the archives. We got 100 shows that are archived there, and they're free if you want to get that more information. And I'll tell you, up-to-date information is really important. If you haven't been to Oslo for a while, it's a different city. Look at this. This is the waterfront of Oslo. And that building with the crooked top, that's the biggest museum in Europe dedicated to a single artist, dedicated to Edvard Munch. It's an amazing museum in an amazing city that's turned its industrial wasteland harbor into a people zone, a thriving people zone. And there's actually a tour, a walking tour with posts all along the way numbered so you can see what it was like before and what it's like now. And there's a borrow a bike program where you can just grab a bike from one of these parking stalls and pedal the whole trip. That's all new. That's all unique to Oslo. And that would be why you need an up-to-date book on this or that place, wherever you're going. I work very hard. That's one of my friends who's a guide in Oslo, Paul. And we work together when I'm in Oslo to update that book. But whether it's a Rick Steves guidebook or anybody else's guidebook, you need the up-to-date book and you need to use it because Europe is always changing. One thing you got to know from the start or decide from the start is, are you going to take a tour or are you going on your own? There's good reasons to take tours and there are bad reasons to take tour. I think a bad reason to take a tour is because you don't think you can do it on your own. Anybody smart enough to be logging on right now has what it takes up here to get around Europe without being spoon-fed by a tour guide. But if you want somebody else to do the driving for you, if you want somebody else to arrange the hotels for you, if you want to have your days organized so you experience a little more with a little less sweat, a little bit less organizing, tours can be a very good value. But there's different kind of tours, and you got to know how to take advantage of a tour so it doesn't take advantage of you. In fact, there's a big chapter in my book, Europe Through the Back Door, called Bus Tour Self-Defense. It talks about the scams and the misinformation that sends to push people this way or that way on tours. I would remind you the big risk about a tour company is if you take a cheap tour, they haven't made their profit yet, and they're going to make their profit off of you once they get you onto the bus. That means by angling for tips, taking you shopping for kickbacks, and parking you out in the sticks so that you have to take the optional sightseeing tours, the excursions, and that's where they make their serious money. So choose your tour carefully, or you can go on your own, equipping yourself with a guidebook and being your own tour guide. Now, you don't need to tab it as aggressively as this woman has tabbed her guidebook, but I kind of like to see all those tabs because she's relying on that book. She's her own guide, and she is having a great do-it-yourself trip. That's what my guidebooks are all about. I work hard so people can read those guidebooks, use them, and be their own guides. And they will know how to tap into local sources of information all over Europe. Local retired school teachers, guides looking for a little extra work, whatever. They team up with the tourist office and they give guided walks around their town. Sometimes it's free. In Bath, the walk is actually free, shown here. But I love those guided walks. If you can afford a private guide, that's great. But if you can't, share the guide with other travelers. If you look at my TV show, you'll notice it seems like I've got friends everywhere. I introduce Christina, for example. Here's my friend and fellow tour guide, Christina from Lisbon. Well, I do have friends all over Europe, but I'm just paying them to be my friends. And if you paid them, they could be your friends too. They are expert tour guides. They're independent business people. They've got a calendar. They want to fill it up. And for a half a day, it can be a wonderful splurge. I'll remind you the cost of a guide varies greatly from country to country. And thankfully, or counterintuitively, the more expensive places where it costs more for a guide, you don't need a guide. London, Scandinavia, and so on, very expensive for a guide. But the cheaper places, that's where it's more challenging and you need a guide. Morocco, Turkey, Poland, Portugal, those are countries where guides are half the price of what you'd pay in Germany or London and double the value. Again, the information we're talking about here is found, the general information, in my book, Europe Through the Back Door. But do remember, I've got about 50 different books covering all of Europe, the cities and the countries. And these books are where you've got all the little details, including the email addresses of guides that I've worked with and who I think are really worth recommending. My favorite restaurants, my favorite hotels, my favorite guides, and most importantly, my take on the sightseeing, cutting through the superlatives so you, the American with the shortest vacation in the rich world, can know how to spend your limited vacation time smartly. Our guidebooks dominate the guidebook world. And it's just fascinating to me that when my publisher comes to town, he always brings us lots of sales information. And routinely, out of the top 15 guidebooks to Europe in the United States, at least 12 of them have my name on the cover. Not because we're so great necessarily, but compared to our competition, we're great. Our competition is what's lame. They just have really lost their soul, and now they're owned by big corporations that just want to monetize the data and are not true blue travelers. We are travelers. We're passionate about travel. We really want people to be able to learn from our experience and travel better. My whole job is to hit and miss and miss and hit and miss and bring home the hits. When I get ripped off, I celebrate because they don't know who they just ripped off. I'm going to learn that scam and share it so you'll know what's up and you won't be victimized by that petty thief. I spend 100 days a year in Europe. Most of that time I'm alone with local guides, just going through my book. I was just in Istanbul for a week, and here's the book right here. And I just was like a crazy traveler, going through every tour, every site, every restaurant in this book, 6 12-hour days. And I'm just so exhilarated by what I learned. And now it's my job to splice in all of these changes into the new book. But you can see right there, there's a lot of changes with every edition of the book. And we update our books in person. That's what distinguishes a Rick Steves guidebook. I want to mention our TV shows, and I'm just, it sounds like one big long plug, I'm sorry, but it's just resources, free resources to help you plan your trip. That's what we're all about. Our mission is to equip and inspire Americans to venture beyond Orlando. We've got 100 different half-hour episodes covering Europe. Think of slicing Europe into 100 slices. Each one, if you say, what should I do in Copenhagen? Here's a half-hour show. That's what you should do in Copenhagen. What should I do in Sicily? Here's 2 half-hour shows. That's what you should do in Sicily. What should I do in Ireland? Here's 4 shows, 2 hours on Ireland. What should I do in Italy? Here's 18 shows, 9 hours. I love Italy. Here's what I would do in Italy. What should I do in Portugal? What should I do in Bulgaria? What should I do in Romania? What should I do in Istanbul? Well, you know the answer. Go to ricksteves.com. Go into the TV section and watch the half-hour show. You can download the script, and the script is even annotated, connecting you with the places that we visited in the show so you can learn more about it. Every one of our shows is available for free, including our specials at ricksteves.com. Also, on the homepage of ricksteves.com, you'll see something called Classroom Europe. Here's where I've broken 100 TV shows into 600 5-minute clips. Each clip is instantly searchable, and it's a gift for teachers so that if they type in water lilies, they're going to get Monet. Whatever you are interested in, you type it in. You want to go to Malta? Type in Malta. Sure enough, there's a 7-minute show by Rick on Malta. There you go. Another important source of information that I'm very excited about is our free app, which is Rick Steves Audio Europe. I've got 60 tours in there, and you could read about them in the book. In the book, there are 20-page chapters, which are the tour, the Golden Horn Walk, Well, the 60 most important of all of those tours in all my books have been produced as audio tours, where you just plug me in your ear, put the book away, and walk with me as I narrate this wonderful slice of Europe. People love this. It's absolutely free, and I just updated it all last year. We visited nearly all the tours, and they're right on. Download this app, get to know it before your trip. It'll be your best friend. There's so many people laughing on cue when they've got me in their ear, getting turned on by the history, the art, and the culture of Europe. If you go to ricksteves.com, there's a landing page called Watch, Read, and Listen. That's where you'll see all the TV shows, all the Monday Night Travel episodes, all of my lectures, all of our Classroom Europe clips, 700 hours of radio programs. You could just type in Rick Steves, Salman Rushdie, and you've got an interview with me and Salman Rushdie. Rick Steves, Paul Theroux. You've got an interview. Rick Steves, Giverny, Monet's Garden. You've got an interview with me and the woman who's the keeper of the garden, where you have those famous water lilies. So much information, all free at ricksteves.com. Our tours are not free, but our tours are the biggest part of our program, and I'm just so proud of the work that our guides do with our tours. We have 14 different itineraries, about 25 people per bus, wonderful guides. What distinguishes our tours from the others is that you've got a guide who's fully paid up front, best paid guides in Europe, up front, no tipping, no kickbacks on shopping, all the sightseeing included. That's the way I want to do a tour. People like it. More than half of the people that take our tours every year are return travelers. There's all sorts of different kind of tour companies, lots of great tour companies. We have a unique kind of tour company. If you're curious about a tour, it's an independent-minded approach. We tap into the efficiency and the economy of organized travel so that our independent-minded travelers can do it smart. I've been leading groups since I was a kid, and it is still exciting. Once in a while, I get to actually get back in the saddle and lead a group around Europe, and I just absolutely love it. What I love most these days is seeing the work that our 100 guides do in Europe as they're working. As I'm over there researching the guidebooks, I get to drop by and meet the different groups as they're having fun. And when I see the smiles on those faces, I know their guide is doing a great job and they're happy they're on a Rick Steves bus tour. These are our guides. Just love our crew of guides. It's a wonderful gang of 100 or 150 European experts who just love sharing their country. This is our flagship tour. I show this shot because I'd like you to see the best 3 weeks that Europe has to offer. That's the main tour that we did right from the start. And if you want 3 weeks in Europe, that's the most diverse, general look at the greatness of Europe. That's exactly what I would do. One reason to take a look at our tour program is to copy our itineraries and do it on your own. And all of these books are designed so you can do our tours without us. That's how these books were born, because people were swiping my manual for the group tours. And I thought, well, this is driving decent people to theft. Let's put everything we know about our tours into the guidebooks so people can do our tours without us. That is the origin of those guidebooks. That's what they're there for. If you want to be your tour guide, these books are $25 tools for a $3,000 experience. Okay, I want to talk about packing. I'm going to have to go a little quicker here, so forgive me for going fast. But in Europe, there's two kinds of travelers, those who pack light and those who wish they pack light. You're going to be going up a lot of stairs. You're going to be going through a lot of big airports. You're going to have to walk to get to the train station, or walk to get to the car park, or walk to get to the tour bus, because the downtown centers, thank God, are now traffic free. That's great news, except you got to walk to get to your car or use public transit. So you want to be mobile. This is what I pack every year. I live out of this 9 by 22 by 14 inch carrying the airplane size suitcase for 3 months out of every year. I've done that since I was a kid. That bag cost $100. If I could get a better bag for $400, I would, but I just can't imagine a better bag. And then I got my little day bag. This is as big as you can carry onto the airplane. 9 by 22 by 14 inches. I like the convertible suitcase model. I helped design this. It sells like hotcakes in our catalog. And then if you'd rather have the wheelie bag, it's the same dimensions, the same smart pockets, but with industrial strength wheels. Very good design for the wheeler bag. Either way, you want to pack light. With our tours, we do not allow anybody to get on our tour with a bag bigger than this. 9 by 22 by 14 inches. It shapes the clientele. 2 weeks, 2 months, rich, poor, winter, summer, north, south, doesn't matter. Man, woman, you got to pack light. It's critical. Exactly what to put in that is beyond the scope of this talk, but I've got a 1-hour talk on packing light and going through everything that I do to pack light. I know I have very little credibility among women for packing light. So we've got one of our great guides, Joan, and she gives a 1-hour talk on packing light. And that's one of the many, many talks available on our website. I want to remind you, thieves target Americans, not because they're mean, but because they're smart. We have all the good stuff in our purses and wallets. You're not going to get mugged or knifed. You're just going to get petty purse snatched and pickpocketed. And a lot of the beggars are not beggars. They're fast-fingered thieves, pickpockets. These two guys, they're thieves dressed up like tourists, ready to get on the trolley and rip off an unsuspecting tourist. There's a woman on this trolley here in Lisbon who is a professional pickpocket. And all the guides know her, and I'm looking at her right now. If you're on that bus and if you're sloppy, you are endangered. If I'm going to the changing of the guard, I want to see the soldiers march. But if I'm a pickpocket, I stand back and look at everybody's rear pockets and their bags, and I decide, who am I going to get? You don't want to be vulnerable. You need to put it in a money belt, zip it up, button it away, leave it in the hotel. But remember, your valuables, if they're with you on the streets, are quite endangered. Just last week, I was in Istanbul, and this is one of my guides, and I noticed how she hung on to her bag as we went through the markets. There's a lot of concern about safety in Europe. Europe is a very safe place from a travel point of view. They've got problems with terrorists, and they solve those problems. I mean, these are not decorative stones there. That's to keep murderous vehicles out of this pedestrian street. You go to an Oktoberfest or any big festival, you're going to go through security just like at an airport. Those guys in yellow vests, they're checking you out. You get inside, and you've actually got a circle of police looking everywhere at the same time. So Oktoberfest in Munich can be safe and happy. What should we do? Party. That's what we should do. We should party. It's safe to go to Europe. Don't tell people have a safe trip. Say bon voyage. If people tell me you have a safe trip, I say, well, you have a safe stay at home. Because where I'm going, statistically, and I know statistics are optional these days, but where I'm going is safer than where you're staying. Enjoy the world. The more we travel, the safer this world will be. That's what I got to say. Of course, the white elephant in the room among travelers and tour organizers is climate change. We are part of the problem, and ethically, we should be paying for our carbon. With my company, we have a self-imposed carbon tax. Every year, we pay $30 for every person we take to Europe, investing it in third world farmers so they can do their farming and contribute less to climate change. That mitigates the carbon we create by flying to Europe and back. It's nothing heroic, nothing to brag about. It's baseline ethical. We take 30,000 people on our tours. It costs $30, smartly invested in carbon initiatives to mitigate, to create as much good as we create bad. And we round that up to $1 million, $330 times 30,000 people is 900,000. Get it up to $1 million, break that into 10 little packages, give $100,000 to each of 10 groups doing amazing things with farmers in the developing world. And we travel with the peace of mind, everybody who takes a Rick Steves tour, of knowing that we're carbon neutral. You can too. Learn about that. It's time for all of us to get busy on that topic. Europe is an inspiration that way. They're turning their formerly congested neighborhoods into people zones where there's public transit and walking paths, pedestrian streets, and bike paths. Underground transit, less fossil fuels. This is the fjord in Norway, that black tail of a whale there. That is a charging mechanism. And when the boat comes in, that goes down and the ferry charges up and it glides away silently without using any fossil fuels. Changing money, well, you don't have to do it very often because of the euro. You got 25 countries or something where everybody's got the same coins jangling in their pockets, but you do need to change money, and you want an ATM machine that is associated with a bank. That's critical. And when you change money in Europe, more and more you're going to be using your credit card and not cash, because Europe is going away from cash. And every time you use your credit card, you've got an option. Should I pay in US dollars or should I pay in the local currency? Well, let me just tell you, they present it like they're doing you a favor by letting you do it in dollars. That's a ripoff. You want to do it in the local currency. Always go with the local currency, so then you'll get the good exchange rate, rather than saying, no, give it to me in dollars, and then you're susceptible to whatever exchange rate they give you, which is not going to be a good one. This is how banks take advantage of naive travelers, and don't let it happen. Get upset with the people that offer you this, kind of shame them into letting people make that stupid mistake, because there's no reason on earth that when you're in Europe, you should pay in US dollars. You pay in the local currency with your credit card, and then it's changed in a fair rate. As far as language barrier goes, I speak only English, nothing to brag about. There almost is no language barrier from a practical, rudimentary getting around. I take my groups, I write my guidebooks, I host my TV shows, I have my vacations speaking English. Nothing to brag about, but we speak the world's linguistic common denominator, English. If a German meets a Greek hiking in the islands, they speak English. Hey, there's a big chapter on communicating called Hurdling the Language Barrier in Rick Steves' Europe Through the Back Door book. And it talks about things like make educated guesses. If you're not feeling well in Denmark and you see a sign with a red cross on it pointing to Central Sick House, well, go down there and get fixed up. It's not that tough. As far as transportation goes, I'm so excited about the transportation that Europe has to offer. Public transportation in the cities, a lot of my friends never get around to learning how to drive. Public transportation is so good. Europe is investing in its infrastructure in a way that makes it a delight to drive, but we got to get off the freeways so we can smell the roses. And if you are planning on getting way out into the countryside, public transportation is a hindrance and you want your own wheels. But if you're going from big city to big city to big city, that's where you want your train tickets, because traveling by train is more green. It is much more convenient, and you go without any traffic problems from downtown to downtown. I am a huge fan of train travel in Europe, and you can go second class or first class. You pay 50% more per kilometer on first class to have a little more room and a little less crowds. You can fly from point to point in Europe, and there's an ethical issue of flying when you don't need to these days. These days, a bullet train will get you there faster in a lot of cases. But if you want to connect those big jumps by air, it's 1 hour and it's $100, and it's pretty darn cool to be able to do that. It used to be quite expensive. Now it's quite cheap with the deregulation of the airline industry in Europe. I'm going to go really quickly, just 5 minutes to cover eating and sleeping here, and we'll wrap it up, and I'd love to get to your questions. But what I want to do when I'm eating is find a local favorite. I want somebody who's mission-driven. Paula here, she just loves to serve her neighbors. Pay extra for good quality ingredients. You don't want the cheap ham. You want the jamón ibérico. Don't be attracted to the biggest sign that says, "We speak English, accept Visa cards, and no frozen food," located on the most expensive piece of real estate where the rent is really high, with a pre-printed menu that stays the same all year long in 5 different languages. Everything's wrong about that. You want a little hole-in-the-wall place with low rent, filled with locals, that has a handwritten small menu in one language. That's everything good about that. You want a handwritten menu because it's got to be shaped by what's fresh in the market this week. You want to eat locally, and you want to eat with the seasons. They have this thing called a 0-kilometer meal over there where everything is right from that region. I love the idea that a smart eater can go to a good restaurant, look at the menu, and from that menu alone, they know what month it is and where they are. If the zucchini flowers are on the daily specials list, go for the zucchini flowers. One thing I look for when I'm researching my restaurants is Michelin-rated places that are not Michelin star. Michelin star becomes very pretentious and quite expensive. I mean, they're great, but you're not dressed well enough for it. But I like just the Michelin-rated restaurants. It's called Bib Gourmand. This is a place I found in Toledo just a couple months ago, and it was a wonderful restaurant. I also love family-style eating where you share the plates. Generally, I order family-style, and I love tapas cuisines, whether it's in Greece or whether it's in Venice or whether it is in Spain. I love those antipasto bars, and I love me a good salad niçoise, a Nice salad. You can have it in Nice, of course, but you can have it all over the Mediterranean world. Tasty, tasty vegetables and a healthy, inexpensive lunch. Share, go to a nice restaurant and order sparingly, and don't worry about sharing. Sharing is great. Order a dessert and have 3 spoons, and you can all enjoy a little bit of it. I would remind you that there's nothing wrong with going to the grocery store and having a picnic. You can have a picnic in your hotel room, or you can have a picnic in the park nearby. But when I'm busy, when I'm tired, when I just want to have nutrition and not spend a lot of time and money, I'll get this meal. This was in, I don't know, Helsinki or Reykjavik, and I went to the grocery store and had a fine meal. In fact, I had 3 meals like that, and it cost me less than $10 per meal, and it was tasty and it was efficient. All over Europe, you've got markets that are morphing into food circuses, great place for lunch, wonderful markets, tasty produce like you can't believe. And a new trend in Europe is food tours. I'm a big fan of food tours. They cost $80 or $100. They're expensive, but you get a private guide with 6 people. You go to 6 or 8 places over 3 hours. It's a meal. It's an education. You got a friend, and you've tasted the best food cooked by the best artisans in that town. It's a great opportunity. As far as restaurant or sleeping goes, I used to say a budget bed. Oh yeah, this is cheap. But I don't want the cheap beds like I used to have. Remember, 84 cents a night. This is $5 a night here with a kitten tossed in for no extra. But these days, I'm just looking for an alternative to this. This is what people are spending $300 or $400 a night on, and we don't need to do that. We need to stay in a funky little local chalet, a little 2-star hotel. And these are all over the place where you get family-run hotels and characters and perfectly good comfort. This is, a couple of people on one of our tours, and this is the standard of a bedroom that you'd have on a Rick Steves tour. I love bed and breakfasts. You get such much more intimacy with the culture that way. You're a guest of a local person. In west coast of Ireland, when I drop in, Mrs. Farrell's always excited that Ricky from Seattle is here. But bed and breakfasts have morphed into Airbnb. And Airbnbs are not so personable. They're not so cheap anymore. And they are devastating, fragile neighborhoods. So there's an ethical issue about staying in short-term housing because it raises the rent to drive the local people away. And what made that neighborhood charming is now no longer there. And the neighborhood becomes a tourist ghetto. So that's kind of something you got to think about when you use Airbnb. But it is a nice alternative to hotels in a lot of ways. Do remember that you can stay in youth hostels. Youth hostels are industrial strength. They are cheap, they are comfortable, they are safe. And if you're over 55, you get a discount on the membership card. So anybody can youth hostel if you are alive, you're young enough to hostel. Europe is crowded. It's crowded with all of us who hustle in, and we all want to go to the same places. Here they are enjoying the Raphael frescoes in the Vatican Museum. Here they are packing into the Pantheon in Rome. And they're going to be packing into the Parthenon on the Acropolis in Greece. You've got to take the initiative to avoid the crowds. In Europe, there's 2 IQs of European travelers, those waiting in lines and those who don't wait in lines. When I look at this photograph of the Parthenon, it comes with a soundtrack. I can hear the guard's whistle blowing at me. And he says, "Mister, it's time to go. We're closing." That's because I go in when everybody else is leaving. It's jam-packed with all the cruisers from 10 till 4 or 5. But when you show up at 5 o'clock, everybody's leaving. It's cool. You got a wonderful warm ambience up there, and it's all yours until 7. I don't know why people don't just work more carefully to avoid the crowds with when they go. When you see a long line like this at the Coliseum, they're not waiting to get into the Coliseum. They're waiting a line to buy a ticket to get into the Coliseum. If you can get your ticket somewhere else, you can avoid that line. Eiffel Tower, there's a long line, and there's a set of empty stanchions there, which I went through because I got my ticket online. And when I got down from the Eiffel Tower after my trip with no waiting, I walked through that whole line there. I looked at every traveler, and not one of them had the Rick Steves Paris guidebook. Have a guidebook, read it with an interest in avoiding the lines and booking things in advance. Get those tickets in advance, those timed entries, and you'll be much better off. All over Europe now, more and more sites require or highly advise getting a ticket in advance, and I would say you should embrace that idea. Also remember, when there's a museum pass, if it works for you, added advantage apart from the economics of it is you get to walk to the head of the turnstile ahead of all the people waiting to buy a ticket. Something I've learned in the last couple of years, as I've taken my guides on winter mentoring tours, is winter travel is great. No crowds, no heat. The cities are relaxed and eager to have you there. Every winter, I take 25 guides on a Rick Steves mentoring tour. These are all professional guides, but they want to guide with us, and I want to make sure they know what a Rick Steves tour is and how it's different from the tours that they lead elsewhere. And we have a great time in the winter. Just bundle up. Remember, in Europe, they say there's no bad weather, just inappropriate clothing. And go to places that have no tourists. If you see 4 guys sitting on a bench, 4 cute guys, ask them to scoot over. You need to be an extrovert. I've been saying that all my career, and it works. Find those guys on the bench and join them. Go to a place with no tourism. So there's so many ways to enjoy Europe. There's so many reasons to plan and think about it so you have a better trip. And there's so many options. You can take a tour. And if you're interested in a tour, we'd love to help you. This is a tour, a photograph I just took in Istanbul a week ago. And judging from the smiles on those travelers' face, they're enjoying their guide. Mine, it's the woman in the middle on the left there. Mine, I had her for my guide when I took that tour. And they're having a great time on a tour. And these people are having a great time on their own because they've got a guidebook. This family's got a guidebook. They use that information. They expect themselves to travel smart. They rip out those chapters, and it gives them power when they got a day off of the cruise ship, and they are good guides themselves. So this is us at Rick Steves Europe. There's 100 of us. We'd love to help you out. Europe is better organized than ever to give you those fun thrills, that great culture, the artisans in action. It's the day the cows and the goats are coming through the town in Switzerland, and you're there. It's the beautiful chunk of the Italian Riviera, and you're there enjoying the best that Europe has to offer. All right. Hey, Brendan, that was fun. I hope that people enjoyed that. And I talked a couple minutes too long, but there's lots to see and do in Europe. That's for sure.
That was a lot of fun. That was a lot of information. And with that, we have, excuse me, a lot of great questions. So let's start with Tom, since we kind of closed on, booking things ahead of time if you're able. Tom says, it sounds like a phone is necessary. Mine does not work outside of the country and cannot be altered to do so. Are there preloaded kind of burner phones available for purchase? And if so, do you recommend that kind of thing?
This is so important. I hate to say it. If you don't have a phone in Europe functioning and aren't good at using it, you're at a huge disadvantage. People expect you to have a phone. We've actually got to that point with our guidebooks. For years, I would buy a phone in Europe, and there were burner phones in Europe, and I suppose you can still do that. But find out how your phone works in Europe, what kind of program you want. I'm sorry, I really don't know the latest on that, so I can't give you the exact advice. But I can tell you more and more and more, you're expected to have a phone. Mm-hmm. You can't get a menu in a restaurant without the phone. Things are changing in Europe. There are countries that rarely use cash. I was just in Iceland, and it was a cash-free society. In Norway, kids don't know what coins are. Kids get money put onto their phone, you see. Mm-hmm. So everything is moving in that direction.
Mm-hmm. And so what about these local hotels and B&Bs and things like that? Are they moving to mostly online as well?
Yeah, it's there's the movement in hotels is you're invisible if you're not with a booking agency. And there's a lot of very independent-minded hoteliers that did not want to, have to go with booking.com, and they gave it a good shot, but they realized, nope, nobody knows they're there without allying themselves with a booking agency. Consequently, they have to charge 20% more for their rooms because booking agencies take 20%. And then you get addicted to that booking agency, and then they say, we want a higher commission in order to put you up on top. We want a higher commission if we're going to put a photograph with your place. And if you don't play that game, you get more and more addicted to it. You fall farther and farther down on the list, and it's very aggressive. What I like to do with my books as much as possible is connect travelers directly with a hotel. So you've got the direct connection here, and then you avoid that middleman. And that gives you as a consumer a little better place at the table when it comes to asking for parking or a free breakfast or something like that. They're making more money from you because they're getting 100% of it. I think they can give you a better deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. So we've had quite a few people ask about avoiding being that tourist. Natasha says, how do I avoid being that tourist that people seem to loathe?
Yeah. Well, that tourist to me is the Instagram tourist that hardly knows where they are, and all they're doing is getting a selfie in front of something famous. And you see it. I've written articles about it. It's just silly. I mean, everybody's crowding to this one pier to get their shot. And I asked the locals, why is everybody on that pier this year? Oh, it's the Instagram place. And do any of those people even know the name of the town? Probably not. They're just there to show off on social media. It's really important as this is as a tool. You don't want to spend your whole time looking into this thing. It's just not. It's a tool, but it shouldn't infringe on your being there. Put it away. Be in the moment. That, I guess. And I don't use this for a lot of apps and so on. Somebody says, oh, you can get an app where you can translate the euro to 3 decimal points. Why would I want the euro translated to 3 decimal points? It's $1.10. If it's $1.05, if it's $1.08, if it's $1.12, does it matter? No, it's $1.10. And what will be next year? It'll probably be $1.10. What's a 25 euro meal cost? $25. Keep it simple. It costs you $27.50, but just think of it as $25, and it's more fun. And you get home and you realize, oh, my trip cost me 10% more than what I thought. Keep it simple.
So Lauren is asking, what are the best options for disabled travelers? I love Europe and no longer know how to travel there anymore due to disability.
Yeah, that's a hard thing to do because much of Europe is intentionally inaccessible. I mean, those hill towns are on hilltops for a reason. What you need to do is remember the most grueling thing about European travel physically, whether you're able to walk or not, or whether you're just older and want to take it easy or whatever, is the heat and the crowds of summer. Go shoulder season, go off season. It's a whole different experience when you don't have crowds and heat. And it's getting so hot and it's getting so crowded because climate change makes it hotter. And all of us who are using crowdsourced information all go to the same places that are doing great on TripAdvisor, So you can fall into that category, but I think it's miserable. So remember, for every famous place that everybody's lining up to, there's all the rest of the places that don't have a mob scene. You can hire a local guide who has a car. A lot of local guides pride themselves in having a car with a license that takes you downtown for people that don't walk very well. And another very practical thing from somebody who doesn't walk very well or can't walk is to take a cruise. I love cruising in Europe. I don't love cruising in the Caribbean, but I like cruising as a way to go effortlessly from one culture to the other that I want to experience, you see. Mm-hmm. So you sail at night, you have 10 hours in this port, you get back on the boat, on the ship, you sail again, you have 10 hours in the next port. And every time that cruise ship docks in the Mediterranean, there's a bus waiting for people that don't walk very well. So you could have 3 generations in a family on a cruise ship, and those who don't want to walk, they go to the bus. Those who want to walk, they walk right off, they rent a bike, and they've got the city by the tail that way. So cruising is a very good option if you're concerned about accessibility.
Okay, wonderful tips. Thank you. Chris says, we're vegans. Will we starve in Europe?
No, you won't starve, but you'll miss half of the fun food. So you got to decide when it comes to your dietary concerns. Is it a health thing or is it a lifestyle thing? And if it's a health thing, sure, just have it very well translated, because waitresses and waiters oftentimes don't speak English and they don't take your dietary concerns seriously. So if you are seriously allergic to this or that, or if you are seriously not eating this or that, you have to have it printed in the local language on a little 3x5 card that you carry with you. And you show that to them and they get their understanding. And then you're going to be taken seriously. It's not as bad as it used to be. Now there's great vegan and vegetarian restaurants. And I work very hard to include a vegan and a vegetarian restaurant, not just a restaurant that has that'll cook you an omelet, or something like that, but somebody who really takes that cuisine seriously. There's impressive restaurants that way, and most good restaurants these days recognize the importance of vegan and vegetarian cuisine, and they will do a very nice gourmet approach to that. So choose your restaurants that way. But I'll just tell you, as a tour guide, there's so much fun in Europe for people who can eat anything. And if you are just doing it as a lifestyle choice, make a lifestyle choice to put that on hold while you're on your trip, and you'll have a better trip.
Mm-hmm. So Lynn is saying, if Europe is going away from cash, then what is a good amount of cash to take?
Well, you take your credit card, your debit card, and you go to ATM machines as you need the cash. And you don't worry about changing cash when you are in a Euro country, because every other country uses euros. You worry more about it when you're in a country that doesn't use the euros, and then you only change what you'll need. Remember, though, you can change less than what you'll need, and you can get out of the country just with your credit card. Your debit card, your credit card, you just tap and pay. It's very, very standard. And I like cash, but it's so interesting that when I was in the north, it's in the north, you got a situation where you've got cash-free societies. I wondered a couple of years ago why it was so hard to find an ATM machine in Brussels, in Belgium. And the local just said, well, not many people use cash anymore, so we don't have the demand for ATMs. But for travelers, we're not there yet, but just keep an eye on that. You'll want to not worry about bringing cash from home. You just change at the ATM to get local currency when you get there. With our tour program in the old days, we used to give everybody a cash pack, so you could hit the ground running and have $20 worth of cash for each country. You don't need that anymore because most of Europe has the same cash anyways, euros, and you got ATMs, which gives it to you at the utopian bank-to-bank rate instead of the miserable tourist-to-teller rate.
That sounds more convenient.
Yeah.
Betty is saying, in case of a medical issue in a foreign country, what assistance will the American Embassy provide, if any?
American Embassy is not a great source of information for tourists that are in trouble. I mean, they're there for tourists who are in desperate trouble, but a lot of people misunderstand an embassy as a service. There you can Google and find out English-speaking doctors. The doctors make calls. Every hotel has experience with doctors if you need to get a 24-hour pharmacy or whatever. Remember, pharmacies in Europe can often diagnose you right there on the spot and give you something you'd have to get a prescription for in the United States, which streamlines things a lot. Remember, a lot of countries have national health care. So you go there and you get fixed up and you ask to pay and it's free. I needed stitches in England, and it was actually an interesting experience once I stopped bleeding. I bumped my head at Blenheim Palace, and it was just bleeding like, oh, God, it's terrible. And I sat in line with all the people and all the coughing kids and all that kind of thing. Finally, I got there, and they fixed me up. And then I said, how much do I owe you? And they said, no, we got national health care, so you're fine. Just don't do it again. It's Europe has great medicine. It's socialized more than ours. And I don't find it to be a big issue. I just remember, if you are in difficult straits, hotels have dealt with this, because you're not the first tourist that was worried about a COVID shot. You're not the first tourist that lost their passport. You're not the first tourist that got pickpocketed. You're not the first tourist that needs to go to a pharmacy. Ask at the hotel and they'll point you in the right direction. Okay. Or go online.
So the last question, we are at the top of the hour. Abigail would like to know, what are your top 3 must-see countries in Europe?
Abigail, that's a terrible question. I had the great joy just before COVID hit of writing a book called For the Love of Europe, which is my top 100 places. Ooh. And it was so much fun just to think about all the great places. And I say that because I don't know what your best countries are. I like Norway because that's my heritage, I like Italy because I love the Renaissance. I love Switzerland because I want to go hiking. You might want to dress up in a ballroom outfit and do the waltz, and you would really like Vienna. You might like chocolate and the best beer in Europe, and you would really like Belgium. You may like World War II history, and you'd want to go to Normandy. So find out what you like. and then go where your travel dreams are taking you. But I've been going to Europe for 100 days a year. And what astounds me is it never gets old. And every year I go to places that I never appreciated until now. And that's great news. And what we need to do is assume you will return. Don't try to do it all in one trip, and recognize the value of good information. And there's a guy named Rick Steves who has 100 hardworking colleagues that would love to help you when you want to plan your trip.
Right. Well, I'm sure that we're all planning trips after this talk. So thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your time and all of the wisdom that you imparted upon us today. I truly appreciate it. I also want to send a huge thank you to all of our audience members for joining us. Without your support, none of this would be possible. So we thank you for choosing to spend your time with us. Below the live stream video, you can find a link to Rick's guidebooks on ricksteves.com. And that's in the resources tab below the live stream video. So we look forward to seeing you all on October 18th when we speak to New York Times bestselling author Ruth Ware on October 26th. And run-on sentence. And on October 26th when we talk with prolific author John Irving about a lifetime of writing. You can register for these and lots of other great events on your library's event page. I'm Brandon Adler. Thank you for joining us.
Happy travels. Thank you.